Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of the Podiatry Legends podcast. Now, my guest today is the editor of Entrepreneur magazine, Jason Feifer. Now, I did an interview with Jason back in 2020 on my older podcast, It's No Secret with Dr. T, and it was such a good interview that I reached out to him and I asked him, could I use it again, or use that same interview on Podiatry Legends? And he said, yes, not a problem. That would be great. He would love for me to use it. And the reason I wanted to use it is because there was so much good information in it. Sometimes you'll do an interview with somebody, and if you try and do it a second time to grab that same essence of that conversation, sometimes it can be really, really difficult. It was so good, I thought I wanted to share it as it was recorded on my other podcast. So sit back and relax and enjoy this particular episode. Jason, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm well. Thanks for having me, and I'm glad we could finally do this. It's been a while.
So the Entrepreneur magazine, it would have to be the biggest business magazine in the world at the moment, wouldn't it? From my view, anyway.
I suppose, yeah, right. Because it depends on whether big is a subjective or objective term. I mean, we have a large category in which we compete of other business magazines, but I think that we're the most culturally relevant right now by far. This is a time in which everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. That word has gone from obscurity and a thing that nobody could spell to something that every celebrity wants to identify with, and I think that every kid aspires to be. And that's an amazing place to be. And it is my humble responsibility to serve that entire broad audience as relevantly as I can.
I think it's funny that you said a few years ago, most people couldn't even say the word entrepreneur, let alone spell it. And now everybody wants to be one.
Yeah, I mean, I misspelled it myself when I first got this job. Yeah, but you didn't work for a company called Entrepreneur. I when I first got this job, I set my email signature to say, I think it was originally executive. I started as executive editor and then became editor in chief. I think it was executive editor, Entrepreneur magazine. And after a few months, somebody responded to an email of mine and said, "Hey, you spelled entrepreneur wrong in your email subject." Email signature, which is terribly embarrassing. So I now am very, very confident in spelling the word entrepreneur.
Well, what's even funny, my background is podiatry. When I got another podcast called the Podiatry Legends podcast. What was funny is podiatry was spelt wrong when it was first done. When all the artwork was done and it was actually put out there.
Oh, no.
It was out there for like a week or so. I had not even noticed that that the graphic artist had spelt podiatry wrong.
Yeah.
And then somebody said, I think podiatry spelt wrong. And I looked and went, my God, we were so used to just seeing something and just accepting, it must be right. That
You know what's funny about that? So there is a place in Maine. I live in New York, and every summer, my wife and I and our kids go up to Maine for a week, and we're in an area called Oxford.
Yeah.
And there is a little like food shop there. I don't know what to call it, farm stand called Smedberg's, and they have a giant sign outside that you can see from quite a while away as you're driving towards it on this big open road, and it says "Home of the Lobster." Lobester. Now it's supposed to be lobster, but it says lobster. And I one time I asked what was going on, because surely at some point they must have known that it was misspelled, because it's been up there for years. And they said it was originally an actual error. And then people found it so funny and memorable, and they kept coming in and referring to the place as the Lobster, that instead of changing it, they decided to just keep it and own it. And so now they sell shirts that say "Home of the Lobster," and it's so much more memorable because of this little quirky error that they embraced. So sometimes errors are okay.
I think so. And one of your most recent articles you wrote about Mark Wahlberg. But there was a quote that he said in there, and which I thought was really interesting. And he said, anytime something didn't go to the way that he wanted it to, I realized that I didn't give it the effort and the focus I should have.
Yeah.
Now, a spelling mistake, he's turned that into a positive. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs, that comment or the quote that Mark Wahlberg said is probably more fitting. When sometimes we want to achieve something and we actually don't put the time and effort into it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. We're often focused on what we want rather than how we can get there. And I think people are oftentimes too impatient, and they feel like the effort that they put in should be good enough. And then they get frustrated that it isn't yielding the result that they want. And, listen, sometimes, and it should be said, sometimes effort isn't enough. I mean, sometimes you
Yeah.
can work your ass off and you will not get what you're looking for. That it's just sometimes you're knocking on the wrong door. You're barking up the wrong tree, whatever it is, right? I mean, the classic example is always somebody like me, a short, skinny kid saying, it does not matter how hard I work, I will not be an NBA player, right? I just won't.
Yeah, well,
Um,
okay, yeah, that's
but
realistic limitations, maybe.
Sure, but that's okay, because I think that if I wanted to be an NBA player and I couldn't, but I really loved the NBA, I could shift my focus and put that same amount of effort into something that would get me as a version of that would satisfy the same desire that I had, while at the same time working off of the things that I actually had accessible to me, right? I mean, I could have become a broadcaster. I could have become, a front office manager or something like that.
Yeah, part of the medical team. Just you're still
Sure,
still in the NBA. You're just not one of
right.
the five players on the court.
That's right. And
Yeah,
and that's, and I think it's just important to say, because there's a lot of glamorization about effort and hustle in entrepreneurship now, and that's fine and good, and everyone should work hard and all that. But we should also recognize that hustle doesn't account for everything. And while Mark is correct, I think, in saying that you can look back on these moments where you didn't achieve something and say, you know what, I could have done that better. I could have approached that better. It's also important to say, you know what, sometimes just banging your head against a wall forever and ever and ever is not going to turn the wall into a door, but you can shift that effort into something that's more constructive and more realistic and fits better with the skill sets that you have and the resources available, and create something that's just as good.
I think that's great advice. So with your business background, or being
Yeah.
the editor in chief, Entrepreneur Magazine, did you always have an interest in business, or was this something that?
No.
So your background would be in journalism.
Yeah. Yeah. My background is not in business.
And I don't want to
journalism.
blow wind up your bum either, but I do like the way that you write,
Thank you.
because I read some journalist stuff and it'll be in a magazine, and it takes three or four paragraphs before they even get to the point of what they're talking about. They'll talk about,
Yeah.
and as the wind blew through my hair and the sun glistened off my glasses, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my god, will you just get on with what this? You're interviewing someone and you're talking about
Mhm.
the coffee on your table.
Right.
Whereas
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that.
You get straight into it. You just go, bang, this is the article. So I quite
Mhm.
enjoy your writing.
Yeah, well, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, that comes out of a number of different things. But the biggest one is remembering who your audience is. This is something that I think so many people want to get into content in one form or another, right? I mean, everybody, not to be disparaging, everybody's got a podcast, right? I mean, I have three, and yet I think people often forget that when you are producing content, and I actually kind of hate the word content, but just for the sake of using it as a placeholder, when you're producing content, you're not producing it for yourself. You're producing it for an audience. And so you better really understand that audience, and you understand how to serve them and what it is that they're in need of, and how you can deliver it in a way that nobody else can. Because otherwise, there's just no point in you doing it. And the thing that I understand about my audience at Entrepreneur that I think is critical is that they're not reading the magazine for fun. They have more to do than they can manage, and
Yeah.
that they have hours in the day for. And so they are reading the magazine to get insights into how to build their business and their careers. And they do not want me to drag them around and show off my writing skills and like do a song and dance in front of them. They want me to get to the point, and I want to honor that. And so I try to write and edit in a way that feels energetic and fast, and always mindful of the audience that I'm serving. And that goes a long way. And I think that anybody, regardless of the audience that you're serving, can take a lot from that. I remember I had this moment. It was funny, years and years ago, totally different audience. my first national magazine job. I had some smaller regional stuff. My first national magazine job was at Men's Health magazine.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
And this was a long time. It was like a decade ago.
And you just mentioned before how
Yeah.
your physique really matches Men's Health magazine too.
Yeah, exactly. Right. My abs are just something to behold. Yeah, right. Just intense pectoral muscles. And so here's the thing. I started writing features for them, and I was writing these profiles of celebrities. And most of the time, it's funny. Most of the time, you write something for a magazine, and even though it reaches millions of people, like nobody writes you unless they're like unhappy.
Yeah.
You just don't hear. You're just like throwing things into the void. And then one day, this was very early on. I wrote this profile. So I can't remember who it was, but it was whoever it was, some big actor. And the person wrote me to say that they loved the story because it was short and to the point and useful. And I was like, that's funny because those are not qualities that I think I was going for, right? Like at the time, I thought of myself as a writer, and I wanted to write great features, and I wanted to, I wanted to like show off my skills. And here's this guy saying, "Hey, I loved this piece because it didn't take me that much time to read," basically. And I thought, okay, well, I like that is weird to hear, but also, if you trust the market and you say, okay, well, if you put something out there and people respond to it, then take that seriously. Well, the thing that this guy liked was that I'd gotten to the point and I didn't waste his time, and I treated him with respect. And there's a lot to learn from that, and a lot to respect in that. And I think that if you're out there serving people, you don't serve people by serving yourself. You serve them by serving others. And so, yeah, sometimes maybe I would like to produce something that's totally self-indulgent. But the thing is that I have to remember that nobody pays me to be self-indulgent. They pay me to serve them. And that's what I'm going to do.
I get straight to the point. So as editor-in-chief, you must also write as well? Or is that's a choice that you choose to write for the magazine?
So it's a number of things. One, I started as a writer, and I've always thought of myself far more as a writer and a storyteller than as an editor. But the thing is, in magazines, that editors are where the jobs are. There aren't that many staff writers in magazines. So a very long time ago, as I was trying to plot my way into magazines, I said, okay, I have to learn how to be an editor because that's where career mobility is.
Yeah.
So I did, but I decided that every magazine that I ever worked at, I was going to write. And crazy enough, there are many, many magazines, especially in the wealthier days of magazines where there was a lot of largesse going on, where they didn't want editors to write and they didn't want writers to edit. They saw them as distinctly separate things. And I always told people when I was interviewing, I will not take a job as an editor unless I can also write. I want to write regularly. And so I would make it a point to always have at least one story in every issue of a magazine that I was working at. Now I continue to do that because I like it.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Is it also part of keeping that skill up? Like if you don't use it for a number of years, you could lose this. It's like going to the gym. You've done the reps to build the muscle. You need to keep doing the reps to keep your writing skills up.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. I do that. And the more that I write, the faster that I write, and also the faster that I think, and the easier it becomes for me to be an editor as well. I mean, one skill always serves another. And I think that's an important thing to remember. And then the final thing is, and this is like a kind of pure practicality thing, but it saves us money. Every time I wrote that feature about Mark Wahlberg, that means that there was one less writer that I had to pay for. I mean, like I am responsible for putting out a great magazine. I'm also responsible for keeping us on budget. And so sometimes it means that I'm going to spend money in one place and I'm going to save it in another place. And sometimes the way that I save it is that I assign stories to myself, because I don't have to pay somebody to write that story. And that's fine. I like that. I think that every leader should be jumping in the fray and
should be doing something himself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So where do you find most of your articles? Are there people from around the world who are submitting articles to you on a regular basis saying, hey, I want to put this in the magazine? Or do you have people that are on a list and you go, what do you got for me this month?
I wish that we had more people on a list where I could say, "What do you got for me this month?" We have a few people like that, and we value them. So we have, I mean, the way the magazines work is that um, we try to build a network of freelance writers, freelance journalists who are always out there talking to people. We also, as the editors who work at the magazine, are in constant contact with the the kinds of people that our audience is interested in. So I speak at a lot of events, and people
Yeah.
come up to me afterwards and they tell me their story. And sometimes I say, "Oh, that's a great story." Or every once in a while, like I've seen a speaker on at an event, and I'm like, "Oh, that person should actually," our mutual friend Jeff Peterson. I when I emceed his event last year, he had a speaker.
And you're emceeing it again this year, aren't you? Biz 360.
I am emceeing it again this year. Yeah, Biz 360 in Delavan, Wisconsin. So last year he had this guy named Jesse Cole, who's the founder of a baseball team called Savannah Bananas, and I watched this guy speak. And the thing that jumped out to me, I mean, he was a great speaker and a great story about how he created this wacky little baseball team, and
Yeah.
and now it's just thriving and successful. But the thing that to me was a story, and these are the things that I think I really have to have to make a great entrepreneur magazine story, especially a long one, is it has to be colorful and fun, but it also has to have a core business lesson to it, and not like a slapped on business lesson. Because sometimes people will try to like retroactively fit a business lesson onto their story, and I can't stand that, right?
And it's really obvious too when
Oh, right. And it's like, and the lesson is to always trust your gut. And it's like, there's no takeaway there for readers. That's like nonsense. You're not understanding the kind of stuff that we do. Jesse has oriented his entire business around this thing that I think he calls it fans first. But the idea is to put the needs and interests of your customers, your fans, front and center. And everybody says they do that, but not everybody does it. And the challenge that he offers everybody, this is the thing. When I heard him say this on stage, I was like, this goes in the magazine. He said, "Stop doing what people hate." Like every business does things that people hate, and right, and like you just do it, and you think that it's okay because that's the way the business is always done, or whatever. Like, stop doing what people hate. It's so simple, and yet you think about business and you're like, "Oh my God, I am constantly engaging with companies that are doing things that I hate, and they know that I hate it. They know I hate it. Why do they keep doing it?" And I mean, listen, we're guilty of it too. I think one of the things that people hate about magazines is like the subscription renewal process. Like, how many times are we going to hound somebody about subscription renewals? I hate that stuff. We should stop that. It's a little out of my control, but it gives you a sense like everybody does something like that. So when I saw Jesse tell this story about the way that he had created this baseball team, and he had this important business philosophy that undergirded it, I said, that's a story for entrepreneur. So yeah, I mean, we're just out there in the world listening to people and talking to people. And then, and then people do email us and just tell us about them. And sometimes that turns into a story. Usually it doesn't, but occasionally it works.
Yeah. So you get referrals from different stories, but if somebody is a budding writer, they can just write to you with an article and say, "Hey, I've written this article," or you prefer more interview style where they've interviewed somebody, they've written the article and sent it that way, not just an article on an entrepreneurial idea?
So it really, it's complicated. I mean, what you're asking is sort of different parts of a broader universe of stuff that we publish. The magazine, which is the thing that pays, is almost exclusively written by professional journalists.
Okay, yeah.
So if you are not a professional journalist who operates by professional journalism standards and like understands what that means and how to work with us, then it's just not a magazine for you. Like it's to write for. Now there are some rare exceptions. We do sometimes we'll work with an entrepreneur to create a kind of first person column, but they're often not writing it. They're actually working with us to craft it together, even though it runs in their voice.
Yeah, but that's what keeps the quality of the magazine up as well.
That's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, it's just not a place, it's not a depository of random stuff. Now, online, which is a broader universe, and of course we have to publish tons and tons of stuff, that there's a kind of more openness to having entrepreneurs write right for us, but it has to be very advice driven. It can't be self-promotional. There are all sorts of rules around it. But the bottom line is that we are here to serve an audience. And if you understand how to serve that audience as well, and you have the ability to do that, then then you can often get some attention.
No, that's great. And so you've got 3 podcasts at the moment.
I do. Yeah.
Now I went, and one of them, the first one I wrote down here was Problem Solvers. This is how we came across each other as well, because I was talking to you just before I pressed record. Was we sort of came across each other's path. You'll notice on my back wall I have a quote, and the quote is talking about the next connection you make could be the one that changes your life. And I honestly believe that whenever you're out and about, you meet people, always make sure they introduce yourself, because you don't know when you're going to meet that person again.
Yeah.
But I was doing a walking challenge, and it was through that walking challenge that I heard you on Kids in the Tank on a podcast, and then I shot a little video about it and shared that. But I know I'd also reviewed Problem Solvers a couple of times, which that is your main podcast. That's the one that comes out weekly.
Yes, that's the one that comes out weekly. Yeah, I wouldn't say main, but it is the one that comes out weekly. Yeah.
Okay, so the other 2 podcasts, The Pessimist Archive and Hush Money, which sounds a bit sus, the old Hush Money, paying a bit of hush money. They're not as regular as Problem Solvers, though.
No, they're not. So a lot of this comes down to production and resources, and so, I mean, I'll give you a quick kind of scan of them all in what is hopefully a informative way for people who might be thinking about content production and not just me rambling on about my podcast. So I have 3 podcasts. Problem Solvers is a weekly show for Entrepreneur Magazine. Each episode is about an entrepreneur that solves an unexpected problem in their business.
Yeah.
Pessimist's Archive is a history show about why people resist new things. So in each episode, we look at the moment that something new was introduced that today we think of as commonplace, things like the teddy bear, the car, the bicycle, radio, the novel. And we try to understand why everybody freaked out about it when it was new. And the idea is to understand people's resistance to change. And then podcast number 3 is called Hush Money. Hush Money is a show that I co-host with Nicole Lappin, who's a best-selling finance author. And each episode, we take on a tricky question about money and life. Things like, should you loan your friend money, or who pays on a first date? Nicole and I debate the subject, and then we bring on yeah, they are tough questions. We debate the subject, and then we bring on a celebrity judge to decide who's right. So, why are they all coming out in different schedules and formats? Well, so it really, again, it comes down to production. So Entrepreneur it's a weekly show. It's very simple to make. Yeah. It's a 1 interview show. None of these shows are just like standard chat shows. Because as a guy who spent his whole life in journalism and storytelling, I just prefer to have more control over the storytelling and create a more produced product.
Well, Problem Solvers came across, when I listened to it, Problem Solvers felt like an audio version of a written article.
Yeah, that's fair. It's a kind of radio produced piece, about 15 minutes long, where I'm the narrator and I walk you through a story, but you also hear from the person who I'm talking about throughout the story. And it's just easy to make. I mean, it takes some time. I usually interview somebody for about 30 minutes. It takes me an hour to an hour and a half to write the script, and then another 20 to 30 minutes to record the thing. So it's easy enough to fit into the work week. Hush Money is produced with iHeartMedia, which is a gigantic company, and so they want an ad sales schedule, and it's too complicated of a show to make every week. So we do it on a seasonal schedule. So we spend a few months producing a season, and then we release the season weekly. For it's 12 episodes a season, and then Pessimist Archive is an independent show, and it's a whole long complicated thing, but basically I come out with 1 episode a month, and I've been working for years to reduce that. It used to be 2 to 3 months an episode, because they're so complicated to produce, and I've gotten it down to a month, and I'm thinking about the various ways that I can build that. I see that as a proof of concept. I'm building different IP off of that, and different talks off of that, and getting it out onto a regular pattern is my goal. So they're all super fun, and I love doing them, and yeah, you just can't drag me away from the mic.
Yeah. So the similarity is they're podcasts, but they've all got three completely different purposes behind them.
Correct. Different
Which
purposes,
is
that's right. Different business models, different teams, different resources. They're not just, I'm not just throwing things out into the ether. They're all kind of strategic.
So, Jason, I want to thank you for coming on It's No Secret with Dr. T. It's a bit of an insight into the magazine entrepreneur, which I'm sure I know a lot of people that listen to my podcast are entrepreneurs, small business owners. So I would guarantee if they have not read Entrepreneur magazine, they've at least seen it sitting there at the news agency and have thought about it. So maybe talking to you today will make them go and grab a copy.
I hope so. Well, hey, go grab a copy. My email address is at the bottom of every editor's letter. And so if you read it and like it or don't like it, reach out and let me know.
No, that's great. And so do you have one final tip before you go?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, sort of parting advice at total random, I will connect it to that I have to stay on schedule myself. So I would say treat your time like your most valuable resource, which is what I always try to do. No, you don't spend money at total random, and you shouldn't spend time at total random either.
Okay, that is perfect. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. All right, take care.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this interview that I did with Jason Feifer, like I said, a few years ago. And a couple of things I want to point out. He made mention of Jeff Peterson, who has also been on this podcast back in episode 238, and it was called Care Differently. And then we did that live from his music studio in Wisconsin, which was a lot of fun. And then he also made mention of Jesse Cole, who has also been on the podcast. He's the owner of the Savannah Bananas, or Savannah Bananas as we would call them. And that was back in episode 118, and it was titled Be Successful by Standing Out. They are two really good episodes to go back to. And my friend Carly O'Donoghue and I also did a book review, which was episode 275, and we did the review on Fans First, which was the book that Jason actually mentioned. And I do recommend going and grab yourself a copy of this, of Entrepreneur magazine. It is a great magazine if you can get hold of it. And always the articles are absolutely fantastic. And if you're an entrepreneurial podiatrist, you will absolutely love it. And talking about entrepreneurial podiatrists, if you want to grow your business and you think a little bit differently to the average podiatrist, and you've been considering getting a business coach in 2024, please reach out to me. Go to my website, tysonfranklin.com, and from there you can make a 30-minute time with me. We can sit down, have a bit of a chat, and see what areas of your business that you may need a bit of a hand with. And sometimes just a 30-minute call is all you need, just to give you a little bit of direction. And one last thing before I finish up, Jason Feifer also has a newsletter titled One Thing Better. I will put a link in the show notes, so if you want to subscribe to that, it comes out weekly. It is a fantastic read, and it's a great way, just sort of gets the creative mind working. So that's it for me this week. I want you to look after yourself, look after your family, and I'll talk to you again next week. Bye for now. Well, if you're still here, I want to share a message with you. And I do this every now and then. When I do a shorter episode, I sometimes put a secret message at the end of the podcast. And this message is a message actually from Jesse Cole, who wrote the book Fans First. And I want to read something from his book, and then I'll explain how I think this relates to our patients. And he said, if we could connect with our new fans and we could show them what we stood for and what we were trying to build, they would forgive us for a few hiccups along the way. And I think this relates to our patients. When you're building your business, if your patients know what it is that you stand for, what your business stands for, and what you stand for, if there's a couple of hiccups along the way, whether it's related to you, your business, or a team member, they will forgive you. And it could be related to you're supposed to have something done on time, and for some reason something happened and you missed the deadline. If the patients, or if your patients know exactly what your business stands for, they will forgive you if you make a small mistake. So it's really important to connect with your patients. Let them understand that this is just not a podiatric clinic. their podiatrist that they go to, and you as their podiatrist, it's an important connection that you should have, and they should really know what it is that your business stands for and where it is going. And like I said, if you make a few mistakes along the way, they will forgive you for it. I hope you get something from that. Talk to you again next week. Bye.